I got sent this video on TikTok from a bunch of people asking me if I'd respond to it. And a bunch of people said, don't watch it, just respond. We want to see your actual first take at it. I don't know how viral it went. I'm imagining it's controversial, or why would people want me to react to it? So let's go straight in and let's see what this guy has to say.
Mortgages. That's the biggest liability somebody will ever take on in their life. But for the bank, that's an asset. Now, it's obviously much more preferable to buy that asset in cash, because you could end up paying 2.5, 3 times more for the property that you want to purchase, but you're doing it on a mortgage. You're taking a mortgage to purchase it. No wealthy people have...
Okay, I already see where this is going. Okay, first, the biggest argument that I think people have when they talk about paying off their mortgage early, or in his case, buying a house in cash, is the interest saved. Like he mentioned, you might be paying 2.5, 3 times more than the value of the house based on all the interest payments you have to make. That's a strong argument, but this is the part that they do not consider. Is, let's say you have a 4% fixed rate for the next 30 years. If you were to pay off that house early, you're saving 4%. Or if you were to buy it in cash, you're saving the 4%. But the question is, what does it look like if you don't put 100% down, right? You don't buy it in cash, you put 20% down on the house and use the 80% to invest in other assets. Can those assets earn you more than 4%? Like, what is the opportunity cost? And right now you can make 4% in a savings account. So if you can go put that money into an investment that can earn you 10, why would you put all of that money in your home? I think you have to consider that. So I don't think he's right on that one. Let's see what else.
Wealthy people stick to the principle that they don't want to take on liabilities, they want to own assets. So it's obviously much more preferable to buy for cash. But people feel like they have no choice.
Okay, so here's another thing that he fumbled right there. Like, this is an air ball. Wealthy people do have liabilities. They 1000% do. It's how they pay for the liabilities that is different. When you look at the wealthy, the whole game is this: own assets. Those assets pay you cash flow. That cash flow pays for the liabilities. So their whole structure is just assets pay for the liabilities. Your active income does not. But they 100% have liabilities. The other thing, wealthy people do not buy things in cash. Why would you do that? Here's another thing that he's missing. Okay, I know why. I already know why people sent this to me. So let's say you were to, in his example, buy a home. Let's say the home is worth $100,000, and you were to buy it outright in cash, and that house were to appreciate by 10%, right? You just made a 10% return on your money. But what if you don't put 100% down? What if you don't buy it in cash? What if you put 20,000 down, finance the other 80,000, and the same exact house appreciates by 10%? Well, your investment just grew by 50%. You can make such a bigger return when you're using leverage than when you don't. Now, there's other costs and fees associated in that, but I just want to give you the example. Wealthy people they 1000% use debt. It grows their wealth or increases their return, and it offers a tax efficiency that is out of this world. Like, when you really get into what the wealthy do, they borrow from assets because they don't pay taxes on debt. He's got this one totally backwards.
Borrow money in order to finance a lifestyle that they can't afford right now for cash, but they pay over, let's say, 25 years. But they do have an alternative, and that's what they don't realize. They can rent. Now, people think that renting is a liability, and they kind of group it in the same basket as debt. Well, it's not debt. It's not a liability in the traditional sense. If you rent, it can actually be an asset because you have no risk. You can walk out the next month, and you can leave anytime, and you have total freedom. And freedom is an asset, and that's what wealthy people get. They understand that.
Okay, hang on. I need to rewind what he just said. So this is what I'm taking from this video. He says something that's true and then something that's false in the same sentence, and why it's Okay, hang on. What did you just say about renting? Okay. Okay, here's another thing, real quick. He's talking about using debt. Here's a part of using something that's true and false in the same sentence. He talks about using debt to live a lifestyle that you can't afford. That part is true. You don't want to be using credit card debt to buy things you can't afford. But he's conflating that into the house you live in. Not the same thing at all. But here's I want to listen to this part again when he talks about rent, because that was let me listen.
Now for cash, but they pay over, let's say, 25 years. But they do have an alternative, and that's what they don't realize. They can rent. Now, people think that renting is a liability, and they kind of group it in the same basket as debt. Well, it's not debt. It's not a liability in the traditional sense. If you rent, it can actually be an asset because you have no risk. You can walk out the next month, and you can leave anytime, and you have total freedom.
Okay, this is wild. This guy is wild. Okay, there is something good about renting. I do want to cover that, but there's something that he just said that I think is very important for everybody to understand. He said, with renting, you have no risk. One thing everybody needs to understand is that you can never grow anything without risk. In order to grow, in order to hit goals, in order to become wealthy, you have to take risk. Risk is probably the biggest separating factor between people who grow significant wealth and those that don't. Risk is a huge part of it. So do not always look at no risk as a pro. In some regards, less risk is important, but no there. Now, there is something that I think he said that is interesting. Renting is not a liability in my perspective. Like, I think he got that part right. I don't think it's an asset, but I don't think it's a liability. It's definitely not debt. Now, what you'll hear people say is, why would you rent? You're just throwing out money, right? How I think everyone should look at it, this is how I do. You have a cost of living. You have a cost of living no matter what. You're either paying rent or you're paying your mortgage. The cost is the same. Now, you can make the argument with owning your home that it's a forced savings account, that you're actually paying off your mortgage, which is going to turn into equity inside of an asset. You can make that argument. What I've always said is, you've got the cost of living no matter what. So with the other dollars that you're planning on investing, you should look at what helps you get to financial freedom the fastest. Is putting that into your primary home get you there, or should you put it into an investment property? So, if you're going to rent so that you can put money into investment properties, I think renting is the right call. If you're just going to rent and not try to invest, then I think renting becomes a challenge. Owning a home is a forced savings account. So this is wild.
Liabilities in debt for people individually, not for companies. It's all about mortgages, credit cards, overdraft facilities, borrowing money to buy cars. These are all the mistakes that people make. They don't think freedom is an asset, and they sign themselves up and they get trapped. One of the biggest rules and biggest principles to stick to is to actually go ahead and buy everything for cash, if you can, because the asset now is better to own than in the future. If you want to buy that asset, you should want to own it now and own it outright. So rent for 10 years, 10, 15 years, and even if the property price goes up, it doesn't matter. It means over that period, you haven't had a liability. You've actually had an asset over that period because you've had freedom. Sure. And then if you end up buying it at a higher price, it doesn't matter. You own it for cash and you've had no liability in between. So this is absolutely essential. It's a principle that everybody should be sticking to. Otherwise, people get trapped and they end up on the hamster wheel. This infrastructure that is built in the Western world, where people borrow money to eventually own assets but have liabilities in between, this infrastructure isn't necessarily designed to benefit you. It's primarily designed to benefit the owners of the infrastructure. What you actually have to do is own your own infrastructure and have no liabilities. So if you have zero now, you have to stick to this principle and get to a point where you own infrastructure with no liabilities in between.
I'm probably going to guess he's never going to be wealthy. I don't think he'll ever be financially free. You can argue that he'll have maybe a peace of mind about his lifestyle. What he just said right there, though, the system is designed for you to use debt. That's what he's actually missing here. The system is built for you to use debt. If you understand how to use debt, you're going to be incredibly wealthy. What he got jammed up here is he almost like bought into like the Dave Ramsey view of no debt anything, but then is also talking about how the wealthy do that as well. That's not what the wealthy do. The wealthy absolutely use debt because they understand how the system's built. Now, him talking about the wealthy buy things in cash. I do not want to buy things in cash. Like if I have the option to buy, let's say, an apartment building, I can pay 10 million bucks for it in cash, or I could put $2 million down and finance the 80 or the 8 million. I'm financing the 8 million. Why would I buy the whole thing in cash? It makes no sense. When he talks about knowing that you're going to buy something today and the value is going to increase, that's all the more reason to use debt to grow your wealth. So this is what I think he's missing, and this is what we're taught that just is so broken. We're taught to stay out of debt because debt puts you in a trap that basically you can never get out of. Like when he talks about the hamster wheel, that is correct for bad debt. What we don't realize is when you put debt on an asset, right? You have an asset backing the debt, and that asset has tenants that pay your expenses and pay your debt for you, right? That means you are not paying for the debt, someone else is. What happens? Well, you have cash flow coming in once your expenses and debt is paid. When the asset appreciates, if done right, if you force appreciation, you're now making a bigger return on your investment. And here's the biggest part is taxes. When you start growing wealth and looking how to keep the most amount of your money, what the wealthy do is they borrow. They have an asset that appreciates. They then refinance the loan, which means they take on more debt. They pull cash out. That cash is not taxed. That is the name of the game for the wealthy. They just stack more debt and borrow from it. Elon Musk had a video on this. Elon's whole net worth is in SpaceX and Tesla. He doesn't pay himself at all. That's his net worth. What does he do? He borrows against his stocks, right? Do you think he pays taxes on the money he's borrowing? Nope. You're not taxed on debt. This guy's information is a liability. The other thing, you know what? What did he say? I just had the thought and I lost it. Freedom. When he talked about freedom is an asset, but you need the asset to create the freedom, right? The freedom comes when you have money that pays you that you don't have to work for, or you don't have to sacrifice your time for. Debt, when done right, will get you to that point faster. It'll maximize your dollars. I see why that is doing the rounds. Here's what I'm going to leave everybody with. It is really, really important that we understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. If you don't understand the difference, that's what you get. That was a blend of like Grant Cardone and Dave Ramsey is what that was. That was crazy. Understand that there's a difference. Stay out of bad debt. When we look at buying things we can't afford and using credit cards to do so, he's right there. That's a liability you want to stay away from. When you look at using debt to buy an asset that generates cash flow, that can increase your return and offer tax efficiency, that is not the same. That is totally different. You got to understand the two. If you guys like these videos, I'll do more reactions. Start sending me the videos. You guys want me to react to them? I'll do my first take on this. Have a phenomenal week and be careful with content like this.